Good afternoon and welcome to Right Now. I'm Chris Reddy here on 95.3 FM, 1400 AM, WILI. We have our regular co-hosts in studio today, Mike DeSoniers, Curtis Ayler, producer Matt helping us out in the studio here, and as I've promised in the past few episodes, we are going to start this election cycle with a number of different candidates representing Eastern Connecticut, and we have in studio with us this afternoon one of those candidates representing the 50th state representative seat. We have candidate Jadon MacCormack in the studio with us. How you doing, Jadon, and welcome to the show.
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me on today. Hey, we're getting to work. We already have hit the campaign trail hard, and we're not stopping for anybody. It's time to get to work, and it's not any moment of rest. You know, I really want to see this year be tremendous.
So, Jadon, if you can do a few things for the listeners and tell them first the state representative seat that you are running for, which towns you are going to look to represent,
right,
and then tell us a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and look at what my district is made out of. We have the southern half of Mansfield, we have Ashford, we have Woodstock, Brooklyn, Pomfret, and we also have such amazing, just culture between everything. I just always love my area. Okay, I'm a little prejudiced because of that, because I just have grown up there and enjoyed it. But yeah, we have a rural district. It's light red, and we're ready to take action on it to get our representation back. Every day I'm looking at, who actually lives here, and it's just everyday people. It's not the city folk that have a certain agenda about them. They're just having a good quality of life. But, what has happened over the past 9 years is we've had a representative in there, and he has not been doing the job. He skips out on votes. He went ahead and, skipped out on the homeschool vote, which was massive. I worked at the Capitol, and I know, Chris, you also worked there from time to time. And, we see the everyday action that's taken place there, and they're trying to take away our liberties. They're already doing that. They already passed legislation to do so. And, my goal, my whole objective is to reverse back 10 months of what they've been implementing on us, and then we're going to take, fire to them. We really are, and that's how it has to be. We're going to be aggressive. We're going to get the job done. So, and a little bit about my background,
yes.
Right.
I was just going to ask you to fill that in.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you chose to run.
Right, of course. As I mentioned, we both worked at the state capitol. I worked in the Energy and Technology Committee, and you might know a familiar name, Ryan Fazio, the guy that just got the governor endorsement for the GOP, and, I worked with him. And we also, saw so many, different legislation get passed through while I was there this year. All, of course, all the heavy-hitting topics. But before I even got into politics, working at the Capitol, deciding to run for state representative, I was a local guy. I was in my Boy Scout troop. I'm an Eagle Scout. I was in the real estate industry, shadowed the #1 RE/MAX agent, and I was able to see how, entrepreneurship was at bay, and I want to make business easy in our area. Connecticut is one of the most unaffordable areas and the most red tape, and we have to change that right now. When I get in there, that's the immediate, after reversing the 10 months, like I said, but, we have to get our business back.
Absolutely, and that is something that we've talked about a number of times in previous episodes of Right Now, and it really is that we have this affordability issue that in part comes from the extremely high cost of living that we have in Connecticut, between property taxes, utility bills, costs for fuel, diesel, home heating oil, natural gas. There are so many layers to this affordability issue that I'm glad that you're looking at this.
Yeah, and let's just look at the public benefits charge that's on our electric bill. I think that's one of the most, common sense revocations we should do, because they're just trying to tax us in a way from just the Green New Deal, that whole thing. That's what they're doing in Connecticut, and they've been doing it, and that's why everything is so expensive, because they have a whole stipulation they want to go through.
So I will follow that up, Jadon, with something that I was going to bring up within this first segment after we started talking to you. And it is a couple of announcements about topics that we've covered on previous episodes. One of them being that Eversource this past week just notified PURA, the regulatory board that sets rates for our electric bills, that it's going to be looking at an 11% increase pretty much through delivery rate charges. And this is really only the first step. They just notified PURA that there was going to be a request for a delivery rate increase. We've talked about the public benefits charge numerous times on this show in previous episodes, where we've seen that this public benefits portion of our bill is one of the single greatest drivers of the increased electrical costs in Connecticut. That's something that is we're able to control that through legislation.
Right.
That's one of the things that we do have some ability to control. But what Eversource is asking now is not only for a rate increase that's going to help them recoup some costs, because we still owe about $600 million of a $3.3 billion amount that Eversource has tried to recover in the public benefits charge since 2017. There's about $600 million of that left, and some of this does cover infrastructure improvements. Some of it does go to technology that helps improve the not only grid, but also the recognition of power outages across the state, so there could be a more timely
and
response.
I'll say something about that number, why it's so high. I believe personally, by working in the Energy and Technology Committee, that it has a lot to do with negotiation. Because our leaders right now, they're bad at business. They're horrible. Most of them are career politicians, right?
Yep.
And they don't know how to run a business. They might have, they're sitting on boards and everything. But that's why a lot of our costs are so high, is because when they're negotiating with Eversource, when they're talking with these people that are experts in sales, they're just saying, oh, yeah, let's do this deal. Okay, it will help us. Oh, is this a green? Is this going to help us with our energy being more efficient? And, all that sort of deal. And that's their negotiation tactic, but that's not helping the everyday person. And let me also say this, is that we're talking about policy right now. This is not about ideology. Nothing about, I almost couldn't even say that word. It's so crazy. But it's true. We're talking about small town politics, and these are the matters that are important. And we have to just go back to the bare bones of what we need to live on.
To kind of bring a finalization to this discussion on PURA and what's happening here, I want people to be aware of a couple of things. With this first delivery rate increase that they're looking for, this is only step one. We have rate adjustments that are made January 1st and July 1st. The July 1st one, we always hope has a slight decrease because we are not as reliant on natural gas. Natural gas being the greatest producer of electricity in Connecticut. We hope that we see a couple of cent decrease per kilowatt hour per month.
We need that pipeline.
Yes, and that's what the lawsuit against Kathy Hochul is trying to bring about here. But the thing that I want people to be very aware of is that this is step one with this delivery rate charge. There's going to be a public benefits rate increase. There's going to be other rate adjustments that are going to be needed within the next few months to be decided upon. The one that I just talked about now that they're saying is going to be 11% is actually going to bring closer to 13% to the average residential customer starting in July of 2027. So this is something that's going to be set into the future by a little bit more than a year right now. And what we should be looking at in the next couple of months is to see what our summer rate setting will be on July 1st. But I'm telling you right now, if we cannot get below the 28 cent per kilowatt hour per month threshold, you're going to be looking at average electrical bills that are going to be over $300 a month during peak demand.
And let's
in
also
July
mention that comes from inflation purposes. When energy costs are high, all our grocery bills are high. I think we know that from a federal level, but in the state of Connecticut, that's true of everyday purposes. So, politics, we have to focus on energy. That's our number one thing. Number 2, energy costs in the whole nation for Connecticut. That's insane. That is called bad business.
Mm-hmm. And very surely we are well on our way to being number 1 in electrical costs
Sadly
per
true.
customer. Yep.
Now,
in the nation.
Jadon and Chris, I'm confused because I heard all kinds of talk out of Hartford that our legislature and our governor Lamont were going to do work to reduce our public benefits charge, and that was going to save money on our electric bills. Now you're telling me things are going the other way?
Welcome to lying Lamont. There you go.
Yes, and to go a little bit deeper on that, there's been a bunch of talk. We had, this idea that there was going to be money available, that people were going to be getting rebate checks just a couple of weeks before early voting started at the end of this year. Then we, got this legislation just a few weeks ago at the end of the session that allowed for the educational cost share money to have a supplemental $180 million and the $100 million aid package that goes to municipalities in this one-time funding. That is in place of what would have offset some of our public benefits charge. So again, it's the shell game of where money is coming from, being utilized and being
But you
shown.
you see how those are short-term effects.
Absolutely.
They try to just funnel money to you so you shut up and say, all right, now you can get voted back in. But that's not how it should be. We should have a long-term play, and that's why we're running. Chris and I, I'm running for state rep. Chris is running for, state senate, and we want that change to happen in a long-term policy. And that's what we need in a state of Connecticut is we need common sense.
Absolutely.
The one other thing that came out of the energy and technology sector this past week is that there is actually acquisition talk of Dominion Energy, which is the company that owns Millstone and operates Millstone. Let's keep in mind that Millstone provides about half of our electrical generation in Connecticut and is definitely over 90% of the carbon-free energy in Connecticut. So this is a huge source of future energy that we rely on, and now it's looking to be purchased by a Florida-based energy company called Next Era, and this purchase that we'll see how this progresses over the next year to 18 months, but it's a deal that could cost Next Era Energy from Florida about $66.8 billion to purchase Millstone. But obviously that has a direct impact on us as energy consumers in Connecticut because it is such a huge source of our electricity and our electrical needs.
And also, here's something about business that a lot of people may know, but they might not. When there's a business acquisition that takes place, they go ahead and increase their costs so they can pay off that purchase price. And so when some company comes in and purchases somebody out, the costs go up for us, the people, the consumers. So we should not be in favor of out-of-state acquisitions. We should actually be the ones at that table when deals like that happen. That's what, the national politics, the federal politics do. You see how Trump got 10% of Intel because of all the data centers? Let's do that with energy. Let's do that with anything else. We have to be at the table negotiating, and that's what we're not having done, and that's what we need.
And certainly in Connecticut, we've seen this from one-party rule for decades now, where our energy demands have actually pretty much stabilized and, in fact, have gone down in the past few years. The demand from consumers for residential electricity has decreased slightly, but overall our costs for our electric bills have skyrocketed, and that's something that we can change legislatively with good candidates and good legislators who can make these decisions that really do help out ratepayers in Connecticut.
And in a long-term effect, though, because we don't want rebates. That's not what we're after. I'm not running this political campaign and say, hey, we're going to go ahead and give you $500 cash because we like you. No, we're going to say we're going to have a bill passed that has negotiation in there. We might need a new governor, too, at that point. We're trying to get Ryan Fazio. I work very closely with them, and I still do. And I want to see all of this change from the very root of the problem.
One of the last things we're going to talk about for this first segment before we have a guest on for our second segment is another issue that is really a topic right now because we're going into the holiday weekend. And one of the things that I can equate this to is 2024 when people were freaking out about egg prices. Well, now it's looking at the fuel costs at the pump. All right, we've seen and we know that Connecticut is one of the highest nationally averaged gas prices, certainly diesel prices because of the tax that's been instituted. We put a 48.9 cent per gallon tax on diesel coming into Connecticut. What most people don't know in the fuel sector in Connecticut is that we have a tax on retail purchase of gasoline and diesel, but also there is another pass-through tax from the point of distribution to the point of the fuel getting to a local gas station that no distributor is ever going to assume on their own. It is simply another pass-through amount that we have to pay. And in this case, when you add on the federal portion, which is less than 1%, but in the state, it's about 8.1% of a distribution tax that there is on fuel, we're looking at something that's over 30 cents per gallon. When you add on that federal tax, by changing this, we could start to decrease some of these fuel costs. In Connecticut, since March, there's been a tax cap. And the way that this works is that whenever the wholesale cost goes over $3 a gallon, this was first implemented by Daniel Malloy back in 2012. But it's an emergency cap that if the price of fuel goes over $3 a gallon, that's the adjustment that they use, is that you can't go with the higher amount for wholesale costs. So if wholesale costs go to $3.70 a gallon, they can only base that tax calculation on $3 maximum. That has been in place in Connecticut since March 31st. Throughout March, it kind of was put in place and suspended, put in place and suspended. Finally, at the end of March, March 31st, it has been in place since then. So we do have a little bit of relief. It's only equal to about 5 cents per gallon that you're getting. But that is in place. And I think that, again, that's something that we need to look at because we mentioned in a previous episode that the Super Climate Fund that they're trying to institute now, where they are retroactively charging companies that have a large carbon emission all the way back to the 1990s, this could add as much as 33 cents per gallon for every gallon of gas, diesel, home heating oil coming into the state. When we have this layering of policy is when we have this effect where costs go way through the roof and really make it unreasonable for the average person to set themselves with a budget that can keep them living within their means. I mean, when you have gas prices that can fluctuate $1 a gallon in a matter of months, somebody who has to travel for work is suddenly looking at a much greater cost there.
But remember, it's not just for travel. It affects everything by inflation, because how you get the produce in the grocery store? By trucks. What do they take? Diesel. And so it's already affected everything in the state of Connecticut. Now, that's why if you were to go to California and you go to a grocery store, you buy bananas and you're like, what in the world? So that's what's going to be coming to Connecticut even worse way than it is right now. So we're trying our best to make this known. We have to expose this.
So, one last thing here, Jadon, as we're getting to the last few minutes, I want to get back to talking to you and what you're doing in your campaign coming up. I understand that tonight is your delegate convention.
That's right.
Do you want to explain to everybody what that means to have a delegate convention for the state representative seat and what you're going to be experiencing tonight?
It means I'm a winner. Okay.
That's great.
So basically, my area, District 50, the whole entire premise to get back to reality here is nobody wants to run against this guy named Pat Boyd. He's some nice guy, type of feel, hometown. But guess what? We can't afford his votes. He votes 98% with his party. And not only that, but he skips legislative voting. So when there's a controversial bill, he says, oh, I have another priority I have to go to, I'll see you guys later, and totally doesn't vote. So nobody wants to run against him, but I see the truth in what's happening. And I said to myself, I'm working at the Capitol here. All right, I see it. But now it's time to take into my own hands and run. And so tonight is the big night. I don't have any primary opponents because I'm the only one that's stepping up to the plate. And so I'm going to get endorsed by the GOP in my local Connecticut, Republican Party here to get on the ticket on the ballot. And we're going to make action take place. I'm committed my time this entire year to campaigning and making these issues known by policy, not just personality. I'm not going to be the only person to say, oh, Jadon MacCormack, he's a nice guy. I'm going to be like, oh, that's nice. But then they're all going to say, but he has the policies to back it up. And that's what we need in the state of Connecticut, especially District 50, which is so agricultural, rural, because we're the small town feel, and we're the only district in the entire state of Connecticut that's light red. So I have the best chance than anybody else in this whole state to win it, and I'm game. And we're going to take action. And tonight is the night when I get that full endorsement. And I already have my campaign manager. He's in this same recording studio with me. And we already have been raising money. Today, I was actually not even in my district, but in Stamford, Connecticut at this homeschooling co-op graduation because I know these issues affect the entire state. But I'm going to do everything I can in my district to promote what's right. And so it takes with being the one in action, and that's what I'm doing.
Excellent. And do you anticipate having a debate against Pat Boyd at some point in the future? Would you like that?
I would be 100% down, but I don't think he's going to debate me. I'll tell you why. Just shortly is because if he gets my name out there, I'm going to blow him away.
Okay. Well, I'm in the same situation where I would readily accept a debate with my opponent in this district. I don't think it's going to happen. But we would absolutely provide equal opportunity for any of these candidates to come on and debate either myself, Jadon. We have our other candidate from the town of Wyndham for state rep, Brian Saucier. I'm sure he would be.
And say hello to freedom of speech. Am I right? We need it. We need this Americanized system to work at play. And that's what the other party's not doing. They don't want to talk. They don't want to come on the radio and just have a moderator and say, what do you think about this policy? Blah, blah, blah. And at least give an answer. We're supposed to be talking. That's why I give my personal phone number. I don't even have a campaign number because I think it's horrible when they change it when they get elected. I want everybody to talk to me no matter what, so I'm there in person for them.
Do you have any contact information that you would like to give to our listeners so they can find out a little bit more about yourself and your policies?
Absolutely. Go to my website, jadon4the50th.com. You'll find my personal number. You'll also find my entire breakdown of my platform that I'm running on. And we're going to take action this year. Everything that I said, I'm going to follow it up by doing something about it. Even though I'm not even elected yet, I'm taking action on every single thing that I say because it needs to happen. No matter even if I get in, I'm still going to take action on it.
All right. So this first segment, we've been with Jadon MacCormack, state rep seat candidate for the 50th state representative districts. He's going to stay with us for the second segment. This has been Right Now on 95.3 FM WILI. Welcome back to Right Now. I'm Chris Reddy in studio. My co-hosts today, Mike DeSoniers, Curtis Ayler, our special guest candidate for the 50th state representative seat, Jadon MacCormack, is in studio with us. In just 1 minute, we're going to have a special guest who's on the phone joining us. To finish up, Jadon, you have a significant hurdle to overcome because you have an incumbent who has been unopposed for the past several legislative cycles. Tell everyone who's listening what you're going to do and what is going to make your campaign special.
It's all about boots on the ground. Everything is about boots on the ground because if you're there in person having those conversations one-on-one with everybody, and that's all I'm doing, I'm there for everybody. And that way they can have a voice. We the people, that's what it is at the end of the day. And just to mention, we are celebrating America's 250th anniversary. That should be celebrated this year. And that has a lot of weight to it when it comes to a conversation with somebody saying, hey, this is our country. This is the celebration year that we can be able to take it back and be strengthened again in our policies. And that's so important. I really do think so.
Absolutely. I think that's a great message for us going forward and going out into the public and doing door knocking, which I know is going to be a big part of your campaign, the same as it was for me in 2024 and in 2026, is recognizing that we can have that conversation where when we get back to the constitutional principles and the founding values that we can all agree upon, that helps to get over some of this political polarization that we're seeing right now.
Right.
So I think you have a good strategy there. We're going to bring our guest on right now to speak with us. And this was the great thing, because not only did we have Jadon come in here as a guest in studio, but he brought a guest with him. So we like it when we have guests like this who can provide us with more content here. You have brought with you today, and on the phone joining us, is a state senator from 1985 to 1987, and from 2011 to 2019 in the 16th District. Joining us on the phone, we have former State Senator Joe Markley. Joe, how are you doing today?
Just great, and glad to be with you folks.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you coming on today.
Hey, Joe.
I'm going to let you say hi to Jadon here, and I think he's going to start off our conversation this afternoon with you.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. I know you're doing me a big favor with trying to help me with my campaign. And at the end of the day, I remember the conversation we had in person together, and you gave me such a good breakdown of why things matter and why they do. And so I wanted you to come on, to do this type of conversation today. That way we can get our heads leveled. That way we can stay focused on what truly matters. So I want to talk with you, Joe Markley, about policy, and especially how America's 250th anniversary, we need to take back our nation, take back the state of Connecticut, and really hit it home. So I just want to ask you one question that's really on my mind today, is what policies really matter in everyday life for somebody?
Hey, you guys, just before I came on, I heard you talking, and you hit the thing that, to my mind, is the center of all policy, which is the Constitution. If there's anything that can bring the country back together, it's the Constitution. Every legislator in Connecticut, every voter, every public official takes an oath to preserve and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the state of Connecticut. And if we could get back to constitutional principles, everything else would follow from that. And to my mind, the most important thing is genuine limited government. For government, for us as a people to say this is what government can do and this is what it shouldn't do and it mustn't do. We've got to keep government within bounds. And that also means keeping the state government out of our local issues and keeping the federal government out of our state issues, bringing the power back home and bringing it closer to the people. And I don't even know how the people on the other side can argue against it, because they honor and swear an oath to the same Constitution that we do.
I know. Isn't that insane just to think that we all are living in America with our liberties, but they want to take it away from us? I think it's sad, but also shows their true colors of what their objective is and why we stay close to what the Constitution is telling us. And, I also want to make sure, just to really pin this down and stay laser focused, what has been your experience? Of course, you've run many campaigns in your time. When you go ahead and talk to the everyday person, the everyday Joe, right, what do you see them concerned about?
Well, I think that a lot of what people want is for the government to leave them alone. People want their liberties respected. People that are lawful gun owners want to have the government get out of their business and let them own their guns in safety and in security. People want government to maintain order on the streets. They want to keep their taxes low. They don't. Unfortunately, we've gotten into a frame of mind where politicians run around saying, here's what the government's going to do for you. Here's what I'm going to get for you. Here's the money I'm going to get from Hartford to this town, or the money I'm going to get from Washington for our state. The idea of the country is for us to be able to make our way as free individual citizens, to find our own way, and not have the government telling us what to do or propping us up or anything else. The government's got to stay in its lane, and then we've got to be responsible. And we're getting away from the idea of personal responsibility. People no longer feel like the things they do wrong are their own fault. They're always blaming someone else for it. We've got to say we've all got a chance. We've all got an equal chance. But it's up to us to make something out of it. And it's not up to the government to bail us out.
And that's why this election's so crucial, because they are trying to take away our individual liberties, such as the gun laws, right? They're trying to eliminate one of the most commonly used guns, the Glocks, right, away from us. And then they're trying to target the homeschoolers and even revoke the religious vaccination exemption, which people use, and especially during the COVID-19 outbreak. Can you imagine trying to work a government job, and even in the military this happened, if you don't want to take something that may have stem cells and goes against your religion, they go ahead and fire you and your whole livelihood is destroyed. That's uncalled for. That right there is not American. That is complete, destruction of society. So, I really appreciate you, Joe, coming on. And is there anything that, you wanted to kind of focus on for America's birthday? What makes America so special, in your opinion?
Well, it is the fact that we're a government of the people and a government by laws, and a republic, as conservatives like to keep reminding folks, which means the people rule, but they don't rule absolutely, because there is a procedure, and there are limits to what government can do, what even the majority can do to us. And politicians have to learn that means that sometimes they're going to take positions that aren't necessarily popular. They have to think about what their principles are before they get involved. And I think the first thing that anyone that gets involved in politics has to do is take a good look at what the Constitution is, because that's the rule book of how this country is supposed to be run. Understand it and make a personal commitment to it, and see how it affects every piece of policy that we vote on. That it makes decisions much easier in Hartford, Jake. If a bill comes before you, and you say, well, is this a good thing or is it a bad thing? How's it going to work? Is it going to work or is it not going to work? You can't figure that out. What you can figure out is this something that state government ought to be doing under the Constitution? Is this a responsibility of state government, or is this something that should be left to local government, or is this something that should be left to the people? Because that's where the decision is made. If politicians spend their time trying to figure out what's going to work and what's not going to work, they're going to make mistakes all the time. They don't know any better than anyone else. What they've got to figure out is, what does my oath of office demand that I do in response to what's placed in front of me? And the funny thing is, you can explain this to people and they understand it. I constantly have people coming up and saying, how could you vote against that bill? Well, I voted against the bill because it wasn't the proper thing for government to be doing. And the response tends to be, oh, yeah, that makes sense. Now I understand. And we've got to have the courage, not only to do what we believe to be right, but to understand that people will support us if we have good reason for what we're doing and if we can explain what we're doing. Not be scared to take a stand on something just because the press is against it or because people's first reaction might be it's a good idea. That's the problem with the gun laws. There's shootings, there's violence, and people say, well, we've got to do something about these guns. And you've got to get the conversation around and say, it's not the guns that are killing the people, it's the fellow who's pulling the trigger. That's the person that we've got to get under control. Right. And the law-abiding gun owners, the good folks at the Connecticut Citizens Defense League and the various activists that I worked on, they're not criminals. I never feel safer than when I'm at a CCDL meeting. We've got to fight crime by going aggressively after lawbreakers and locking them up and having swift, sure justice, not by putting restrictions on people that are following the law.
Right, and I'm so glad that we are here for the people and not for our own purposes. Now, Joe, I'm just going to transfer you to Chris Reddy here. He's running for state senate right near me, and me and him are almost coinciding with our campaigns because it's the ones that really matter in this district. So, Chris, if you have any questions.
I do have one question for you, Joe. I know that your background is in education and that you were a English teacher and professor. From an education standpoint, I've read a number of studies recently that are showing more and more that the amount of money per pupil is not necessarily the leading indicator for success in our schools, and that we have to have some sort of a change in focus so that there's more parental accountability for improving the outcomes of our students, especially coming out of something like COVID, which I think really was detrimental to many students across the nation, but particularly in Connecticut. Can you just talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And Chris, pleasure to be on with you. You ran a great race, and I'm so pleased that you're taking another shot at it, and I believe you have one of the best chances to pick up a seat of any Republican in the state.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Yeah. So, per pupil spending, the idea that this is the measure of how much we care about education is ludicrous. The problem with education, again, is it's just as you said in the question, that it's parental involvement that's critical, and it's letting local officials run their own school systems. Anybody that represents a state senate district represents very different communities. I'm from Southington. My district included Waterbury, and it included Wolcott. Two towns that are right next to each other. Couldn't be more different.
Right. Yep.
And the idea that the state is going to come in and say, okay, we know what schools in 169 towns ought to do, and we're going to tell them. We're going to make laws to govern them. Absolutely not. Let Wolcott run the Wolcott schools the way it sees fit. The people of Wolcott know their own kids and their needs better than anyone else in the world. And let Waterbury, a very different situation, approach it in a very different way. And part of that means get the power back in the hands of the elected school board. And it also means school boards that have the confidence and the courage to lead, not to depend on the administrators. I think everybody knows there's a kind of a capture that takes place where school board members, in many cases, kind of defer to the administration, to the superintendent. And it's easy to see why. They say, gosh, this is, he's got the doctorate in education, he has this experience and everything. No, the premise of this country is that the average citizen with a good heart, with common sense, with a commitment to principle, can run his own life and run his own community and not have to rely on professionals brought in from someplace else. So that's part of it, is to let the towns find their own way instead of telling them what to do, and let each town find a unique way that's suitable to the people that the kids that are in their community. And parents' instincts about this are very good, which is, back to basic education, enforce discipline in the school system. There's no mystery to how it works. And one more thing I'll say, which is hire good teachers and get rid of bad teachers. Teaching is a profession like anything else. Some people are suited for it and some people aren't. And you've got to make a decision pretty quick when somebody comes into your system to say, this is somebody that can teach well. You can improve somebody a certain amount, but if you don't have the gift for it and you don't have the kind of the metabolism for it, you really shouldn't be doing it.
Especially when it comes to homeschooling, I just want to jump in there, is that, we have such a good basis for homeschooling parents where they can go ahead and have their kid have freedom and liberty and a way to educate. Now, the public school system is not the standard. We have to realize this. And especially, those charter schools that they don't have as much funding, but they outperform everybody else. That's something that people do not even touch or blink an eye at, but it's what's happening across the country right now. And I think the state of Connecticut is trying to, advance their agenda onto everybody, the homeschoolers, the charter schools, the private schools. We see it in legislation, what they're doing right now. As I was working at the Capitol, that's what they're targeting. And, I just love how we're focused on the real policies that matter, such as education in the state and all our liberties at hand.
Yeah, the big government liberals and the bureaucrats can't stand the idea that they're not in control of everything. And homeschooling has not been a problem in the state of Connecticut. Homeschooling has been a success, and Connecticut historically has given homeschool parents more latitude than most states have. The bureaucracy has been coming after the homeschoolers for decades, going back to my first time around in the legislature back in the 1980s. And they really have finally making progress on it. And the homeschoolers, and of course homeschooling has expanded as the public education system has been failing. The homeschooling parents, fortunately, are getting organized and realizing that they have to fight back to it. And they've got to proselytize to the rest of the state of Connecticut so that people understand what it is they're doing, the kind of results that they're getting, and the importance of recognizing that the state is not the parent. The parents are the parents. And, another thing I'll say about it is there are going to be failures in homeschooling. There are failures in everything. There's some parents that are better at it than others. There's some cases where it's not going to go as well as it does in other cases. That doesn't mean you get rid of it any more than you get rid of public education because it fails some students.
Right.
But homeschooling is working, number one, as a pragmatic matter, it works marvelously well. Turns out students of tremendous caliber and academic success. And number two, it is simply the right thing to do, to acknowledge that the parents can make these decisions for their children. They know the kids the best. They care about the kids the most. They're the ones that are supposed to be deciding.
Right. And I'm a product of homeschooling here. In my high school days, I literally was homeschooled. So I see so many parents that are tremendous at teaching their children, and especially, you have a curriculum. Come on, it's not like they just drop them in the wilderness and say, go fend for yourself. That's not what's happening, folks. This is true, success that we've been seeing with homeschoolers. Same thing with charter schools, private schools. All of this, we can be outside of the public school system, and we need that choice. We need our liberty. We the people, to make the decision again without the government saying, hey, we're going to take control of all this and make it our own. And that's not how America is run, especially on America's 250th anniversary. We don't want to go that direction, and we're going to stay the way it should be.
Yeah, the educational bureaucracy is terrified of having alternatives because people are going to see very quickly that the alternatives are working better than business as usual, and the public schools will lose students, and the bureaucracy will have to change its way. And of course, public education can be great, but it's not going to be great if it's the only game in town and there's no competition. It's like anything else. If you only had one restaurant and that's the only restaurant you could eat at, the quality of the food would go down.
Right. We don't want monopolies.
We don't want monopolies. We don't want big things. We want small things on a local, personal level.
Yeah, and certainly public schools are not for every child. There are certain kids who, thrive in that home setting. One of the things that I've always said is that parents are the teachers all the way up until that moment that they enter the public school system, if that's that choice. So all those milestones from birth to 4 to 5 years old that a child goes through are facilitated by the parents. And then all of a sudden the child walks through the doors of a public school, and now they're owned by the government.
And the parents remain the primary teachers. I mean, I can honestly say that I learned more from my father than I learned from any teacher I ever had, and maybe from all the other teachers I had put together, not simply as a model or, in emotional ways, but in actual conversations about real subjects that I learned tremendous amounts of things from. And not every child maybe has that experience, but that's what we should be encouraging parents to do, instead of saying, hey, here's the solution, give us more tax money and we'll take care of the problem for you.
Yeah,
I know.
certainly the line has been drawn in the sand by the state legislature for homeschoolers now. We saw in this last session that the majority party decided that they didn't even want to listen to any more testimony
Right.
that was provided, in person. There was, Jadon, you were there. There was hundreds of families supporting homeschooling.
Thousands
Yep.
of people, I guess hundreds of families. But it was amazing that day seeing all of them come out. Now, the Democrats were not happy. I was working with the Democrats because I was an assistant clerk, and you would not believe how they reacted to that day. They made the most disgusting comments. However you chop it up, they hate them. They literally do hate them with the bottom of their heart. And also, I was going to mention earlier, public schools did not exist in early America. Because think of our founding fathers. Do you think they went to public school? I don't think so. And look at what we have. Look at the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. Everything that makes America great is a product from homeschooling and self-taught. Think of Abraham Lincoln. He did not go into a public school system. He was self-taught, and look at the man he became.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, it's personal responsibility. That should be the first thing that we preach, is your fate is in your own hands. And in this country, that's a good place for it to be because every opportunity is available to us. We have even the poorest folks among us have opportunities that people in other countries and other times would be amazed at. And Lincoln was as poor as anybody. No president ever. It's hard to imagine how awful that man's background was, and what he was able to rise up from.
Certainly, and we see that all throughout history, from Frederick Douglass working with Abraham Lincoln in that Reconstructionist era. That's where a lot of this greatness came from. And like you said, it was that idea of accepting personal responsibility and making the most of the opportunities that are given to you.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much for being on with us this afternoon.
Thank you, Joe.
This has been our guest,
Hey,
Joe
my pleasure.
Markley. We hope that you can come back sometime in the future and join us in some more conversations, but we've been really glad to have you here this afternoon, sharing some of your insight and some of your wisdom from your time
And let's
in the State
celebrate.
Senate.
I want to say this. Let's celebrate America's 250th because we need to. This is our time to show us that America is great and we have something to celebrate. So thank you so much, Joe Markley. I really appreciate
good luck
you.
to both of you gentlemen. Keep up the good work.
Thank you.
We're coming up to the end of our show here now, just a few minutes left. I want to take care of a little bit of business and remind everybody that you can listen to any of our previous episodes of Right Now or Mike's show Unfiltered on Mondays by going to either WILI.com. You can go to the podcast menu, scroll all the way down. You'll see both of our shows. They are in podcast format for you to listen to at any time. You can also go to YouTube and search WILI, and Right Now you can see the in-studio video recording that we conduct here in studio. You can watch that video usually a couple of days after our show. We have that uploaded. And we also have Spectrum Public Access Channel 192. My show is available Tuesdays at 6:30, Saturdays at 7 o'clock. You can tune in and, again, watch the in-studio recording that we have going on here. We have just a couple minutes left. We're going to finish up here with one topic that I want to kind of close the show with, and that was some legislation that Governor Lamont signed in this week, providing no excuse absentee ballots in the state of Connecticut. We've spent episodes talking about this in the past, and while accessibility to voting is important, we know that in the chain of custody of ballots, no excuse absentee ballots are going to be the most common form of ballot that will be fraud or have fraud committed utilizing it. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement, when it's conducted investigations into voter fraud, has deemed that the absentee ballot is the single greatest tool for someone who wants to commit fraud. We've seen this here in Connecticut. And what we've done in this legislation being signed in by Governor Lamont this week is not done more to secure our elections. In fact, it's probably weakened our election integrity We've seen this over and over again in prior election cycles, from Wanda down in Bridgeport stuffing ballots into a ballot box late at night.
That's their track record right there.
Exactly. So we're going in the opposite direction of what we need to do to secure our elections. These are the things that have happened in this past week. We're going to keep you updated on all of these topics that we talk about each week right here on Right Now. We have been with Jadon MacCormack, who is our state representative candidate for the 50th District in Eastern Connecticut. I wish you the best of luck in your delegate convention tonight.
Thank you.
Run, Jadon, run.
Yep, I look forward to hearing from you about this. We will be back 2 Thursdays from now, because we will not have an episode next Thursday. But make sure that you tune in 2 weeks from now, Thursday at 3 p.m. to Right Now here on 95.3 FM, 1400 AM, WILI.